Hi everyone, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to be speaking to you today. My name's Isabella. I'm a digital strategy consultant here at Impression, and I'm going to be talking to my colleague Laura, who is a senior digital strategist, all about getting the balance right between brand and performance marketing. If you do have some questions throughout, there is a comment section where you can jot these. We will be able to address these at the end, so feel free to add your questions as we go through. We will also be sharing today's slides and the recording with you later on today. So if there are things that come up after the talk, we're more than happy to answer any questions via email as well. Cool. So to run through the agenda for today, we are going to be talking about brand, defining what brand marketing is and the importance in today's digital space, before moving on to what does actually brand campaign and planning look like. How do you define your channel mix? And really importantly, how do we go about measuring this activity? We're then going to move on to integrating this with the rest of your marketing, in particular your performance marketing, before giving you some actionable tips around perfecting your budget split. Cool. So successful marketing all comes down to choosing the right places to spend your budget. And this really is going to be the focus for today. We're going to start off and talk through some of the theory behind this before going into actionable advice to determine where the right place to spend your budget is. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Laura.
Thanks, Isabella. So I guess one thing to highlight here is that in today's world, often marketers actually face the challenge between deciding whether to utilize brand marketing or performance marketing. Brand marketing really focuses on increasing the awareness of your brand, but also of its proposition, promises, and core values, while performance marketing actually focuses more on harvesting demand within the market by using conversion-driving activities for which we then actually see direct return on investment. Now, the solution to this challenge of whether to utilize brand or performance marketing is actually to engage in both. Now, we understand that it's a lot easier to get bottom of the funnel activities approved, as these are often linked to immediate results, such as an increase in revenue or ROAS, for example. However, even with seeing all of these immediate results throughout bottom of the funnel activities, engaging in brand activity at the top of the funnel is actually instrumental for your growth. Now, we didn't come here today to just tell you that it is instrumental for your growth, but actually to explain to you why this is the case. So firstly, we need to understand what brand marketing really is, to understand why it is so important within our marketing mix. Now, when thinking about the term brand, it's not really just your logo or your identity. A brand actually is a promise to a customer that you are the right choice to solve their problem, which means that in short, a brand is connecting products with its customers. Now, this means, though, that in turn, for this connection to take place, customers actually need to be aware of your brand. And this brand awareness is actually made up out of brand recall and brand recognition. And all of this together has now actually been proven to positively influence a customer purchase intention. So even though we're looking at brand activities that lie at the top of the funnel, so at the start of the customer journey, these influence customer decisions whether to buy a product or service at the bottom of the customer journey. So what we can see here is that at the top of the funnel, this is where brand awareness lies. This is where the customer goes about gathering information about the brands or several brands, and they become aware of them. And then as they move throughout the funnel, closer to the bottom of the funnel, this is where they then recollect and evaluate all of these information. And this is where their purchase intention starts to formulate. This is where they decide whether to buy from you or from a competitor. And knowing that brand awareness actually influences this purchase decision just again highlights that brand awareness activity is actually of paramount importance within your marketing mix. Now, this is especially the case throughout times of crisis, such as the recession that we're currently still experiencing. Often in times of recessions, advertisers actually look to cut down their spend. But this is actually the time where it's most important to focus on your marketing activities and to engage in brand awareness activities rather than cut your spend and neglect them. And the reason for this is that within these times of crisis, even though customers hold quite a low confidence and are not very generous with their spending and trying to save money where they can, they are still exposed to all of your activities and they're still exposed to everything that you are doing, which in turn actually allows you to create top of mind awareness. So this means that after the crisis is over and people are ready to spend their money again, they will think about you and your brand, and they will go to you before thinking and going to others. This means that when they are forming their purchase decision, your brand is instantly a consideration within this. But it's actually not just this that makes brand activity so important within today's marketing mix. It's also that it has been proven to be the key for long-term growth. So many of you have very likely seen this study before, but Liz Binet and Peter Field have done extensive research, and they have found that brand activity is actually what helps you to gain that incremental long-term sales growth. So on this graph, we can see sales uplift over time for brand and performance activities. And when we're looking at the short-term sales activations, they are represented in blue within this graph. We can see that they are there on a constant level, but also they aren't really rising. And the short-term activations are going to dominate roughly for like the first 6 months. But that is when you can see that the long-term brand building activations are really kicking in, and they're starting to far outreach the sales levels that you would have made if you would have just focused on performance activations. Now, the reason that this is actually the case is because brand activities allow you to break out of the current customer group that you are targeting and actually open up your audience pool. So looking at our little illustration on the right side, we can see that conversion activities are right at the bottom. We're having a very defined audience. We know who we're targeting, whereas brand activities are taking place at the top. So we are widening our audience pool, and we're having actually the chance to move this audience throughout the funnel towards the bottom and getting them to convert. This means for us that we're not actually going to hit that ceiling of revenue that we're seeing because we're not. Oh, I'm really sorry, my light just went off, because we're not alienating future audiences. And in addition to this, this also means that we're not really falling risk to short-termism, and we're thinking about the long term.
Nice. Thanks, Laura. It's really great to understand the theory and thinking behind why brand is so important, and why we should be considering brand objectives within our marketing. I guess the next question really is how do we go about doing this? And I imagine the first thing that we want to look at is which channel is going to drive those brand objectives for us.
Yes, of course. So to identify which channels to utilize for brand activity, it's actually important that we consider and understand 3 key factors first. So firstly, it's really important to understand what you are actually aiming to achieve. So what is your objective? This is something that becomes especially important in relation to performance marketing. So we'll touch back on this in a little bit. But 2 other things to consider is which audience are you aiming to reach? And at the same time, what are these audiences' characteristics and behaviors? Now, the reason that this is important is because understanding these factors allows us to inform our channel and budget choices. So we've put a little example on the slides here. So we can see that, let's say we're knowing that we're aiming to target 25 to 54-year-old females who are interested in luxury shopping. We also know they over-index for Instagram and connected TV. So this actually tells us where we can target them and what messaging to focus on and what to put in our copy. And ultimately, this is how we know where to best spend our budget.
Laura, often we work with clients and advertisers who might not have huge marketing budgets, which means that often brand would get deprioritized just because we aren't able to reach everyone who is within that top of funnel or cold audience. What would be your recommendation for advertisers who are in that position?
Absolutely, totally understand this question. I think my first recommendation is to please not worry. Don't worry if you don't have a never-ending pot of budget available for these activities. Really, our main recommendation here is to focus on saturation over reach. So we want to ensure that you're hitting the right audience on the right platform at a higher frequency rather than trying to reach everybody. And one way to, for example, make your awareness audience a little bit smaller is to identify the most important demographics of your audience. So that's, for example, what we've seen in the previous slide. You can do this by looking in Google Analytics, seeing which audiences, which demographic is most likely to convert or which demographic visits your site most. And this way, you then ensure that actually you're having maximum impact and greater efficiency with all of your digital activities. But I guess another benefit actually of running these awareness activities on our digital channels is that it allows us to be a lot more specific with our targeting. And the channels that provide us with greater targeting mechanics that we can then utilize for brand activity are, for example, programmatic, where we're looking into the direction of, let's say, connected TV, digital out-of-home display, or YouTube. But at the same time, paid social and digital PR are also great channels to utilize for brand activity. So for programmatic and paid social, we actually have the opportunities to target our cold audiences based on demographics or interests, like we've seen before in our example. And for digital PR, on the other hand, we can actually support all of our branded activities by, let's say, obtaining coverage in quality publications that we know that our audience spends time reading. Now, we do also know that at the end of the day, we still have to somehow measure everything that we're doing. So we also have to measure the brand activity. We understand that measuring the top of the funnel is not always as straightforward as attributing revenue to an ad. However, there are plenty of options to engage with and to create a bespoke reporting framework that will actually work for you. We can, for example, test incrementality through geo-split testing, or also measure increases in branded traffic throughout or following the brand awareness campaigns. And in addition to this, engaging in brand and search lift studies, or, for example, platform surveys, will also provide you with further insights into the impacts that your activities are actually having. And Meta specifically also lets you optimize your campaigns towards ad recall. So this is basically measuring how memorable your ad is to its audience. And if you remember right from the beginning of the webinar where we've spoken about brand awareness, brand recall is one of the key things within this concept. Additionally, we can also look at brand share of search within the market to then identify if there have been any possible spikes throughout the time that our awareness activities were running. And then in the end, all of this will impact the long-term revenue growth.
Cool. So we understand that brand is key for long-term growth and having that bigger picture view. But we're also aware that advertisers will most likely have short-term sales targets. So how do we go about still doing this brand activity whilst making sure that those short-term targets aren't neglected?
So the short answer to this is to integrate both brand and performance activities, because this will actually ensure that we're still able to hit those short-term sales targets while having a long-term focus. There's actually quite some significant consequences of not integrating approaches. So this is, for example, your teams working in silo and not being aware of each other's activities. And this can then run at the risk of cannibalization of these activities. At the same time, if you spend money on all of your conversion activities, but there isn't actually demand within the market, that means there isn't actually a customer pool to convert from your ads. So this lowers your efficiency and also risks wastage. And not integrating brand and performance activities can also lead to a fragmented customer journey. What this means really is that you might reach people at the top of the funnel, but you lose them along the way, risking a loss in potential leads and conversions. Now, there are a few things to consider and steps to consider to actually successfully both integrate these approaches. And the first recommendation that we make is always to have a shared objective that both performance and brand work towards, because this will help align all channels and also ensure that the activities are staying on track. But beyond this, there's a little more that you can do to make sure that both of your approaches integrate seamlessly. So following this, we recommend that you actually break down how each of your channels is contributing to this goal in a bottom-up approach. So this is where you then integrate measurement metrics that we spoke about, for example, share of search, branded traffic, or ad recall. And next, it really is key to understand the synergy between the channels and between performance and brand activity. So for example, let's say we're running brand activity and this could lead to an increase in brand search. And this increase in brand search in turn could lead to an improved paid search performance. So it's really important to understand how all of these things play together. And lastly, we'd always recommend having a holistic, integrated, and regular reporting approach. You can really utilize any tool of your choice to create a framework that highlights the performance against your KPIs. And inspecting this regularly will allow you to understand the impact that your brand activity is actually having. And then you can react with possible ad hoc adjustments that you might want to make on the back of what you're seeing within your reporting. And just like for branded activity, obviously there are certain channels that are better suited for performance activities. So looking at paid social and paid search, these channels really are perfect to target in-market audiences through, for example, let's say consumer browsing signals or on-site signals. But in addition to this, we can actually also utilize SEO, either to drive traffic through lower intent keywords, as well as driving revenue through higher intent keywords. And additionally, we also always recommend looking at conversion rate optimization because in the end, you're putting all of these efforts into place and you're creating this entire integrated strategy, which is great, but you want to ensure that all of these efforts actually also pay off and the customer has the best chance of conversion once they are actually on site. And I think this is like the place where we get to the golden ticket question that probably every marketer has posed themselves once in their life. And it is, how do I actually split my budget between performance and brand? The short answer is there is no right or wrong way to split your budgets. But there are steps that you can take in order to actually find a split that works for you. So the first step to take here is to identify the jobs to be done. Look at your objective, look at your goal, see what you're actually trying to achieve, and then scrutinize and prioritize between the immediate versus long-term needs. Before you go on and decide on a budget split, it's also really important to consider the potential impact of each activity in order to then understand its relative importance towards reaching your goals. And lastly, it's always best to adopt a test and learn approach. So pull together historical data, first-party data, to utilize this to actually inform your first initial split. And then through a testing approach, you will be able to see what works and what doesn't work. And then you can make further decisions based on this. You'll be able to see if you need to adapt, if you need to shift some budget around, because you will have this test and first-hand impact experience. Now, if you still don't think that brand is the right thing for you, or you still aren't sure if brand has the biggest impact for your activities, just look at Airbnb. They have actually shifted a very, very large portion of their marketing budget away from performance marketing towards branded activity in February 2021. And they have just reported their most profitable quarter ever, with a 24% increase in revenue year over year and a profit of $1.9 billion. So that to me already speaks the world. This is crazy what they've achieved just by switching their budgets a bit from performance towards brand. But I think in summary, if there are a few things to take away from this today, I think it should be that brand activity is actually invaluable to your marketing mix. It is the key driver of top of mind awareness. It's been proven to drive long-term sales growth because it widens your audience pool. And the key channels you can utilize for this activity is programmatic, paid social, as well as digital PR. And there are several opportunities that you can target your colder audiences with, for example, by relying on demographics or interests. And identifying your goals and audience characteristics will then help you to inform your channel and budget decisions. And you can lastly integrate performance and brand activity to ensure that you can actually hit your short-term sales targets while also setting yourself up for long-term growth. Thank you so much for listening. Let's see if we have some questions.
Yes, as I said at the beginning, we have got a little bit of time. If anyone does have any questions, we will be sharing the recording and the slides if you'd rather follow up on email. One question that's come to my mind, Laura, as you were talking through the measurement piece in particular, you've mentioned share of search as being a really valuable metric to look at. I was wondering if you could just give a bit more of an explanation about what that metric is.
Yes, of course. So share of search is a really great metric to utilize for brand activity. There's been a study by Le Binet which has actually shown that share of search is a metric that's directly related to market share. So what this metric really does, it takes all of the searches for your brand and divides it by the searches for all brands in the category to give you a percentage overview of how much share of search you hold. And as it is a leading indicator of market share, what it really does is it shows you that if there has been an increase in share of search, you can also infer that there has been an increase in the market share that you are holding. So when you're engaging in branded activity and then you can see that your share of search has increased, you know that it had an impact on this, and that ultimately also shows you that your brand activity has had a positive impact.
Cool, thanks. We've had a question from Ollie. How does your approach change when launching a new unknown product versus a well-established company brand/product?
I think the biggest way that the approach changes is just in the data that we have available. So when we're looking at an established company brand and product, usually we already have a lot of first party data at hand that tells us a lot about our audience. So we likely have already run previous activities, even if it was conversion driving activities. We kind of have an idea on what creatives people are responding to well, what copy they are responding to well. We have a lot of information that we can already utilize for targeting. Whereas if we're looking at an unknown product, is a little bit more of a testing approach here. So in total, I would still follow each of the steps that we have spoken about today, but I would be a lot more prepared to do some testing and some budget shifting, and also look at the creative and how that is performing as well.
Nice, thanks, Laura. Yeah, and just to add to that, when you're in a position where you've got an established company brand or product, you've already got a pool of people who are ready to buy from you, which means that you don't need to work quite so hard in generating that demand. So actually, when we have got a new product, that brand piece becomes even more important as we try and build demand to fill the audiences at the bottom of the funnel, which we can then harvest through the performance marketing. So hopefully that's answered your question, Ollie. Can't see any more questions coming through at the moment, unless anyone jumps in quickly now. But yeah, as I mentioned, we will be sharing the slides, so please do get in contact with us either via LinkedIn or email. We're more than happy to carry on the conversation.
Thanks everyone for listening.
Cool. Thanks everyone. Bye.